Human baby stuck in a rapid river. A passing bear's decision changed destiny forever. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the dense forest canopy, casting long shadows across the churning waters of Cedar River. The usually calm stream had transformed into a raging torrent after 3 days of relentless spring rain. Water crashed against jagged rocks, creating a deafening roar that echoed through the wilderness. Deep in the Blackwood Forest, miles from the nearest town of Pinecrest, nature ruled with unchallenged authority. Olivia Winters clutched her 10-month-old daughter, Sophia, tightly against her chest as she struggled to maintain her footing on the slippery riverbank. What had begun as a simple camping trip to reconnect with nature, after months of city life had turned into a desperate fight for survival. Her husband, Noah, gripped her elbow, trying to guide her along the treacherous path as they searched for a safe crossing point. "We need to find somewhere to cross before nightfall," Noah shouted over the river's roar, his voice strained with worry. The ranger station should be just a few miles downstream. Their campsite had been washed away hours earlier when the river unexpectedly burst its banks, taking with it their tent, supplies, and Noah's phone. All that remained was the small woven basket they had brought for Sophia, which now held their few salvaged possessions: a blanket, a half-empty bottle of water, and a small jar of baby food. "It's too dangerous, Noah," Olivia cried, her foot slipping on the wet earth. "Maybe we should just wait here until morning." But Noah knew better. The water was still rising, and the narrow strip of land they stood on was shrinking by the minute. The approaching darkness would only make their journey more perilous. "We can't stay here," he insisted, pointing to a fallen tree trunk that stretched almost all the way across the river about 50 yards ahead. "Look, that could be our way across." Olivia eyed the makeshift bridge doubtfully. The massive pine tree had fallen recently, its needles still green and fresh. Its trunk was wide enough to walk on, but the surface would be slick with rain and moss, and it didn't quite reach the opposite bank. There would be a small jump at the end. "I don't think I can cross that while holding Sophia," she said, looking down at their daughter. Despite the chaos around them, Sophia was remarkably calm, her big blue eyes taking in the forest scenery with innocent curiosity. Noah considered their options. "We'll use the basket. We can place Sophia in it and pass her between us as we cross." It wasn't ideal, but they had no better choice. Night was coming quickly, and with it, the temperature would drop. Sophia needed warmth and proper shelter. They made their way carefully to the fallen tree. Noah tested it first, placing his full weight on the trunk to ensure it would hold. Satisfied, he turned back to Olivia. "I'll go first. Hand me the basket when I'm halfway across, then follow behind me." Olivia nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line as she gently placed Sophia into the woven basket. The baby looked up at her mother, a small frown forming on her face as if sensing the tension in the air. "It's okay, sweet girl," Olivia whispered, tucking the blanket securely around Sophia's tiny body. "Mommy and Daddy are right here." Noah began his careful journey across the log, moving inch by inch, arms outstretched for balance. The roar of the river below was terrifying, but he focused only on his footing. When he reached the midpoint, he turned and called back to Olivia. "Okay, hand me the basket now." Olivia lifted the basket containing their precious daughter and took her first tentative steps onto the fallen tree. The bark was indeed slippery, and she moved with agonizing slowness, the basket clutched tightly in her hands. One step, then another. The rushing water below made her dizzy, but she kept her eyes fixed on Noah's outstretched hands. She was almost to the middle when it happened. A large branch, carried by the current, slammed into the tree trunk with tremendous force. The impact shook the entire log, and Olivia lost her balance. Her feet slipped out from under her, and she fell hard onto the trunk, somehow managing to maintain her grip on the basket. But the jolt sent the basket flying from her hands. "Sophia!" Both parents screamed in unison as the woven carrier tumbled through the air. By some miracle, the basket landed not in the raging water, but on a large, flat rock protruding from the river's surface about 20 feet downstream. Sophia's startled cries rose above the sound of the rushing water. Noah immediately scrambled back toward Olivia, who was clinging desperately to the log. "Stay there," he shouted to her. "I'll get to Sophia." But as he helped Olivia regain her footing on the trunk, they watched in horror as the water level rose higher, beginning to lap at the edges of the rock where their daughter's basket had landed. The makeshift cradle shifted slightly with each wave that crashed against the stone. Nearby, unnoticed by the frantic parents, a massive brown figure emerged from the forest. A female grizzly bear, her thick fur glistening with moisture, paused at the riverbank. Her powerful nose twitched as she caught an unfamiliar scent carried on the damp air, the scent of a human infant. The grizzly was an imposing creature, standing nearly 7 feet tall when on her hind legs, with powerful muscles rippling beneath her dense brown coat. A jagged scar ran across her right shoulder, a reminder of a territorial dispute with another bear years earlier. Local rangers called her Sierra, though she answered to no name, bound only to the ancient rhythms of the wilderness. Sierra had been drawn to the river by hunger. The spring salmon run was late this year, and she had emerged from hibernation 2 weeks ago with an empty stomach and depleted fat reserves. She had spent the afternoon fishing without success, growing increasingly irritable as twilight approached. Now she stood motionless, her small ears perked forward as she processed the strange sounds competing with the river's roar, human voices and a high-pitched cry unlike anything in her forest domain. On the fallen log, Noah had reached Olivia and helped her regain her balance. They clung to each other, eyes fixed on their baby's basket as it shifted precariously on the rock. "We have to get to her," Olivia cried, her voice breaking with panic. Noah frantically scanned their surroundings, looking for any path to reach their daughter. The current between the log and the rock was too powerful to swim. Attempting to wade through would be suicide. "I'll try to climb down the bank and reach her from downstream," he decided, already moving toward the shore. Olivia's grip on his arm tightened. "You'll be swept away. There has to be another way." As they argued, neither noticed the dark shape moving deliberately along the riverbank. Sierra's powerful legs carried her swiftly downstream, her eyes never leaving the strange woven object on the rock. The bear had never seen a human infant before, but something about the tiny creature's cries triggered an ancient instinct deep within her, the same protective urge that had guided her when her own cubs were threatened. 3 seasons ago, Sierra had given birth to twin cubs in the warmth of her winter den. They had emerged in spring, tiny bundles of fur full of curiosity and mischief. For months she had taught them to fish, to find berries, to recognize the scent of danger. But as summer waned, a lone male grizzly had stalked them for days before attacking, while Sierra was distracted by a beehive. She had fought savagely, driving the intruder away, but returned to find only one cub cowering in the underbrush. The other had vanished, its fate unknown though Sierra had searched for days, her mournful calls echoing through the valley. Now, as she watched the human infant's basket shift again on the rock, a low rumble emerged from her throat. The sound was neither threatening nor fearful. It was the same sound she had used to call her cubs when danger approached. Sophia's cries grew louder as water began to splash into her basket. The rock had begun to submerge as the river continued to rise, its surface now only a few inches above the churning water. The woven container slid another inch toward the edge, its bottom becoming saturated and heavy. "Noah!" Olivia screamed as she saw the basket begin to tip. Noah had reached the shore and was scrambling down the steep bank, his shoes sliding in the mud as he tried to make his way downstream to a point where he might reach the rock. But he was still 30 yards away, with treacherous terrain between him and Sophia. Then Olivia gasped, pointing with a trembling hand. "Oh my God! Bear!" Noah's head snapped up, and his blood ran cold. There, on the opposite bank, stood an enormous grizzly bear, its attention fixed on their helpless baby. Terror, unlike anything he had ever known, seized him. "Hey!" he shouted, waving his arms frantically. "Get away from her!" But Sierra paid no attention to the man. Her focus remained entirely on the basket and its tiny occupant. With deliberate movements, she entered the water, her massive form barely affected by the current that would have instantly swept a human away. The cold water rose around her legs, then to her chest, as she navigated toward the rock with surprising grace. "No, no, no!" Olivia cried, watching helplessly as the predator approached their child. She scrambled off the log, intending to somehow reach Sophia before the bear could, but Noah caught her arm. "Wait," he said, his voice tight with fear, but something else flickering across his face, a wild, desperate hope. "Look at how it's moving." Sierra moved with purpose, but without aggression. She reached the rock and sniffed at the basket, her huge head lowering until her nose was inches from the crying infant. Sophia's cries paused for a moment as she stared up at the massive creature, her tiny hands reaching upward in innocent curiosity. The parents watched, frozen in horrified suspense, certain they were about to witness their worst nightmare. Noah fumbled for a rock, a stick, anything he might use as a weapon, though he knew it would be futile against the bear's enormous strength. What happened next would be seared into their memories forever. With astonishing gentleness, Sierra nudged the basket with her snout, pushing it away from the edge of the rock. When that proved insufficient, she carefully took the edge of the basket between her teeth, not biting down, but holding it with a delicacy that seemed impossible for such powerful jaws. Then, to the parents' utter amazement, the bear began to move back toward the shore, carrying the basket with Sophia inside. "Is it taking our baby?" Olivia whispered, her voice faint with disbelief. Sierra fought against the current, her powerful legs finding purchase on the riverbed, even as the water tried to push her downstream. The basket remained held carefully in her jaws, kept just above the water's surface. Sophia had stopped crying, perhaps shocked into silence by the strange movement or soothed by the rhythmic swaying. Halfway to the shore, disaster struck. A massive section of debris, branches, logs, and human trash swept downstream by the flood, surged around a bend in the river. It slammed into Sierra's side with tremendous force, nearly knocking her off her feet. She let out a grunt of pain, but maintained her grip on the basket, though the impact caused her to stumble sideways. Noah and Olivia cried out in unison as they saw their daughter's basket dip briefly beneath the surface before the bear regained her footing. Sierra shook her massive head, water flying from her fur, and continued her determined journey to the shore. But the collision had consequences. Blood now mixed with the water, streaming from Sierra's flank, where a sharp branch had torn through her thick hide. The injury would have sent most creatures retreating to safety, but she pressed forward, seemingly undeterred by her own pain. "She's protecting Sophia," Noah said in wonder, hardly believing the words even as he spoke them. The bear reached the shallows and climbed onto the river bank, still carrying the basket. Only when she was safely away from the water did she set it down with surprising care. Sophia was soaked but appeared unharmed, her eyes wide as she stared up at her unlikely savior. Sierra stood over the basket protectively, her massive body forming a living barrier between the infant and the raging river. She sniffed Sophia again, then raised her head to look directly across the water at the humans. For a breathless moment, the wild animal and the desperate parents locked eyes across the churning water. Something seemed to pass between them. An understanding beyond species, beyond language. Then Sierra did something unexpected. She raised her head and let out a low, rumbling call that echoed over the water. "What's it doing?" Olivia asked, still clutching Noah's arm. I think she's calling to us," Noah replied, his voice filled with wonder. "She knows Sophia belongs with us." The bear repeated the call, more insistent this time, her eyes never leaving the humans. Noah made a split-second decision. "We need to cross. Now." "How?" Olivia gestured to the raging water. "The log. It's our only chance." His voice was firm with newfound determination. "That bear just risked her life to save our daughter. I'm not going to let Sophia down by being too afraid to reach her." Together, they returned to the fallen tree and began to make their way across again, moving with greater urgency but also greater care. Noah went first, testing each step, with Olivia close behind. The crossing seemed to take an eternity, each footfall a battle against fear and the slippery surface beneath them. On the far bank, Sierra remained standing guard over Sophia's basket, occasionally glancing down at the infant as if checking on her welfare. Blood continued to trickle from the wound in her side, staining the earth beneath her paws. As the parents neared the end of the log, another sound joined the cacophony of the river, sharp cracks echoing through the forest, followed by human voices. It was distant but growing closer, a search party. Someone else was in these woods. Sierra's head snapped up at the sounds, her body tensing. The bear's eyes darted between the approaching sounds and the humans on the log, clearly agitated. Wild animals feared nothing more than the sound of multiple humans moving together, and every instinct was now telling Sierra to flee. Noah sensed the bear's growing anxiety. "We need to hurry," he urged Olivia. "I think she's getting spooked." They redoubled their efforts, moving as quickly as they dared across the final section of the tree trunk. When they reached the end, they faced a 6-foot gap between the log and the shore. A jump that had seemed manageable before but now appeared treacherous with exhaustion weighing on their limbs. Noah went first, gathering his strength and leaping across. He landed on his feet but immediately dropped to all fours for stability on the muddy bank. "Come on," he called to Olivia. "You can do it." Olivia took a deep breath and jumped. For a terrible moment it seemed she wouldn't make it, her foot slipping as she landed halfway on the bank. Noah lunged forward, catching her arm and pulling her to safety just before she could slide back into the churning water. They lay there for a moment, gasping for breath on the wet earth. Then a soft whimper reminded them of why they had made this perilous crossing. Together, they scrambled to their feet and turned toward the bear and their child. Sierra watched them approach, her massive body still positioned protectively over the basket. A deep growl rumbled in her chest, not aggressive, but clearly cautioning them not to approach too quickly. They stopped about 20 feet away, uncertain how to proceed. "What do we do?" Olivia whispered, her eyes fixed on Sophia, who appeared to be contentedly playing with the edge of her wet blanket, seemingly oblivious to the danger around her. Noah slowly removed his jacket, then his flannel shirt underneath. leaving him in just a thin t-shirt despite the cool evening air. He carefully laid the shirt on the ground in front of him, then took several steps backward. "Food," he explained quietly to Olivia. "I have granola bars in the pocket. Maybe it will see it as, I don't know, payment? A thank you? Or a distraction?" Olivia suggested, understanding his intent. The sounds of the search party grew louder, shouts and whistles, the beams of flashlights visible through the trees on the far side of the river. Sierra's ears flicked nervously toward the sounds, her massive head swinging between the approaching search party and the parents. "We don't have much time," Noah said urgently. "She's going to run soon." Olivia made a decision. Slowly, very slowly, she began to sing. The same lullaby she sang to Sophia every night. Her voice shook at first but grew stronger as she continued, the gentle melody somehow carrying over the noise of the river. "Golden slumber kiss your eyes, smiles await you when you rise. Sleep, pretty baby, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby." The effect on Sierra was remarkable. The bear's tense muscles seemed to relax slightly, her aggressive posture softening. Her eyes remained fixed on Olivia, head tilted slightly as if listening intently to the unfamiliar sound. Noah pointed to himself, then to the basket, making his intentions clear. Sierra watched him, still guarding Sophia but seeming to understand. With agonizing slowness, Noah began to approach, keeping his movements fluid and non-threatening, his hands visible at all times. The bear's eyes tracked his every move, but she didn't growl again. When Noah was just 10 feet away, he stopped, not daring to come closer to the massive predator. Sierra looked down at Sophia one final time, nudged the basket gently with her nose, then slowly, deliberately stepped aside. It was such a human gesture that tears sprang to Olivia's eyes as she continued her soft singing. Without wasting a moment, Noah rushed forward and scooped up the basket with Sophia inside. The baby, remarkably, was smiling, reaching one tiny hand toward the bear as Noah quickly retreated. "Thank you," he whispered to the animal, feeling foolish yet profoundly grateful. "Thank you for saving her." Sierra watched them for a long moment, her intelligent eyes seeming to hold some emotion the humans couldn't name. Then the shouts from across the river grew suddenly louder, and the bear turned away. With surprising speed for her size, she disappeared into the forest, leaving only trampled undergrowth and a few drops of blood as evidence she had ever been there. Noah reached Olivia's side, and they clung to each other, their daughter safe between them at last. Sophia was wet and cold but unharmed, making soft cooing sounds as she nestled against her mother's chest. "Did that really just happen?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did a wild bear really just rescue our baby?" Before Noah could answer, bright flashlight beams cut through the gathering darkness, illuminating them from across the river. Voices called out, and they heard the welcome sound of their names being shouted. "Hello!" Noah yelled back, waving his arms frantically. "We're here! We need help!" The search party had found them. Help was coming. But as the couple held their miraculously saved daughter between them, they knew that the most unexpected help had already come and gone, in the form of a creature they had been taught all their lives to fear. "No one will ever believe us," Olivia said softly, stroking Sophia's damp hair. Noah looked toward the dark woods where Sierra had vanished. "I'm not sure I believe it myself," he admitted, "but it happened. That bear, she knew exactly what she was doing." As they waited for the rescue team to find a way across the river, neither of them noticed a small movement at the edge of the forest. Sierra had not gone far. Hidden in the shadows, she watched over the human family, her wound painful but not life-threatening. Something about the infant had awakened memories of her own lost cub, creating a connection that transcended the natural boundaries between their species. When she was satisfied that the humans were safe, the great bear turned and limped deeper into the forest. The rising moon illuminated her path as she made her way toward her den in the distant mountains. Behind her, the human voices grew fainter, but the memory of the small, helpless creature she had saved would remain with her, an inexplicable moment of compassion in her otherwise wild existence. But Sierra's journey home would not be without its own challenges. The wound in her flank, though not immediately life-threatening, left a trail of blood droplets on the forest floor. In these woods, blood was an invitation, a signal to other predators that vulnerability existed. And Sierra was not the only large predator that roamed Blackwood Forest. The bear moved more slowly than usual, her powerful muscles protesting with each step. The rainstorm had transformed the forest floor into a treacherous maze of mud and hidden sinkholes. Twice she stumbled, letting out low grunts of pain as her injured side struck fallen logs. The forest, usually a sanctuary, felt increasingly hostile as darkness deepened around her. An hour into her journey, Sierra paused near a small stream to drink, her massive paws sinking into the soft mud of the bank. As she lapped at the cold water, her reflection rippled back at her, the fierce eyes, the scarred muzzle, the proud bearing of an apex predator. Yet something had changed within her tonight. The encounter with the human infant had awakened memories and instincts she had buried after losing her cub. The crack of a branch breaking nearby brought Sierra's head up sharply, water dripping from her muzzle. Her nostrils flared as she caught a familiar and unwelcome scent. Wolf. Not just one, but several. The local pack had been expanding their territory recently, growing bolder in their incursions into what had traditionally been bear country. Sierra rose to her full height, a formidable 7 feet of muscle and fury when standing on her hind legs. The display would normally be enough to deter most threats, but her injury made her vulnerable, and wolves were intelligent opportunists. They could smell weakness just as clearly as they could smell blood. A low growl emerged from the darkness, followed by another from a different direction. The pack was spread out, surrounding her. Sierra dropped back to all fours, turning slowly to keep track of the threats. Yellow eyes reflected the moonlight from between the trees. 4 wolves had her surrounded. The pack leader emerged first, a large gray male with a battle-scarred face that spoke of years of survival in these unforgiving mountains. He was followed by 3 others, a younger male and 2 females, all lean and hungry after the harsh winter. They circled Sierra cautiously, aware of her power even in her injured state. In her prime condition, Sierra would have stood her ground, confident in her ability to drive off or kill any wolf foolish enough to attack her directly. But tonight, exhaustion from her river rescue and the pain of her wound had depleted her reserves. Fighting would be dangerous, perhaps fatal, if the wolves managed to hamstring her. Sierra made her decision. With a thunderous roar that shook leaves from the surrounding trees, she charged directly at the pack leader. The sudden aggression caught the wolf by surprise, and he leapt aside with milliseconds to spare as Sierra's massive paw swiped through the air where his head had been. The momentary confusion among the pack gave Sierra the opening she needed. She crashed through the underbrush using her enormous bulk to plow a path through the forest. Behind her, she heard the yips and howls as the wolf pack regrouped and began pursuit. Sierra's only advantage was her intimate knowledge of this territory. She had roamed these woods for nearly a decade and knew every cave, ravine, and thicket. About half a mile ahead lay a narrow passage between 2 rocky outcroppings, wide enough for her to pass through, but narrow enough that the wolves would have to come at her one by one if they followed. Her massive heart pounded as she pushed her injured body to its limits, hearing the wolves gaining ground behind her. Their lighter frames moved more easily through the dense undergrowth than her bulky body. Sierra's breath came in ragged gasps, each inhalation bringing the scent of her pursuers closer. The rocky passage appeared ahead, a dark gap between two looming boulders. Sierra surged forward with her last reserves of strength, squeezing her bulk through the narrow space. Once on the other side, she turned to face the entrance, rising again to her full height with her back protected by solid rock. The pack skidded to a halt at the entrance to the passage. The leader's lips curled back in a snarl of frustration. He paced back and forth, calculating the risk of entering the narrow space where Sierra waited. One wolf might be able to slip through, but would immediately face the bear's full fury without the support of the pack. For several tense minutes, predator stared at predator across the narrow gap. Then, with a final defiant howl, the wolf leader turned away. The pack melted back into the forest, but Sierra knew they wouldn't go far. They would follow, waiting for her to leave the protection of the rocks or for weakness to overcome her. Sierra remained in her defensive position until she could no longer smell the wolves nearby. Only then did she slump down, exhaustion finally claiming her. The wound in her side had reopened during her flight, fresh blood matting her fur. She needed rest, but this exposed position wasn't safe for long. With great effort, Sierra pulled herself back to her feet and continued her journey, moving more cautiously now, using every shadow and patch of cover. The wolves would be watching, and other dangers lurked in the night forest. Still, her den lay less than 5 miles away in the higher elevations of the mountain. If she could reach it, she would have sanctuary to heal. Meanwhile, back at the river, Noah and Olivia huddled with their daughter as rescue workers from Pinecrest arrived at the scene. The search party had found a safer crossing point upstream and had made their way to the stranded family. Among them was Park Ranger Marcus Coleman, a grizzled veteran of Blackwood Forest with 30 years of experience. "You folks are lucky to be alive," Marcus said, as he wrapped a thermal blanket around Olivia's shoulders. This river's claimed lives before, in flood conditions. Noah cradled Sophia, who had fallen asleep despite the commotion. "We wouldn't be alive if it weren't for the bear," he said, still processing the miraculous events. The ranger's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Bear? What bear?" Olivia and Noah exchanged glances. Would anyone believe their story? It sounded impossible even to them, and they had witnessed it firsthand. "A grizzly," Olivia said finally, a female with a scar on her shoulder. She saved our baby from drowning." Marcus's weathered face showed clear skepticism. "Ma'am, I understand you've been through a traumatic experience, but grizzlies don't save people. Quite the opposite, usually." "We know how it sounds," Noah insisted. "But we both saw it." The bear pulled Sophia's basket from the water and brought her safely to shore. The ranger's radio crackled with static before he could respond. He stepped away to answer it, leaving the couple alone for a moment. "They don't believe us," Olivia whispered. Noah nodded. "I'm not sure I would believe it either if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes." Marcus returned, his expression more serious. "That was the station. They've had reports of a wounded grizzly in the area, probably the same bear you encountered. A hunting party spotted blood trails about 2 miles from here." "Hunting party?" Noah's stomach clenched. "It's not hunting season yet, is it?" The ranger's face darkened. "No, it's not. But there have been problems with poachers in the north section of the forest. The bear you saw is likely Sierra, one of our tagged females. She's known to rangers but stays away from humans usually." He hesitated, then added, "If she's wounded and moving through the forest at night, she's in danger. Not just from poachers, but from the local wolf pack, too." Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. She was wounded helping us. There was blood on her side after something hit her in the river. Marcus studied them carefully, reassessing their story. "You really did see her rescue your child, didn't you?" "Yes," Noah said firmly. "She saved our daughter's life, and now she's hurt because of it." The ranger was silent for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "I'm going after her. Sierra's important to the local ecosystem. She's one of our few breeding females. If poachers get to her—" He left the thought unfinished. "We're coming with you," Noah said suddenly. Marcus shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. You have a baby to look after, and you've all been through enough tonight." Noah argued, "The rest of your team can take Olivia and Sophia to safety." "But I need to do this. That bear saved my daughter. I can't just go home knowing she might die because of us." Olivia touched Noah's arm. "You can't be serious. It's too dangerous." Noah looked at his wife, his expression resolute. "I owe her, Olivia. We both do." A complicated series of emotions crossed Olivia's face: fear, understanding, and finally reluctant acceptance. "Just come back to us," she whispered. Marcus had been watching this exchange with growing respect. "You understand we'll just be tracking her, right? If we find her, we'll tranquilize her and treat her wounds, then release her. This isn't a rescue mission like you're thinking." "I understand." Noah nodded. "I just need to know she'll be okay." The ranger studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "Fine. But you follow my lead, do exactly as I say, no exceptions. We'll be dealing with a wounded predator in difficult terrain at night. One mistake could be fatal." As the rest of the search party prepared to escort Olivia and Sophia back to safety, Noah geared up with equipment borrowed from the rangers: a heavy jacket, hiking boots, and a powerful flashlight. Before they departed, he kissed his wife and daughter goodbye. "Be careful," Olivia urged, holding Sophia tightly against her chest. "That bear might have helped us, but she's still wild." Noah nodded, touching Sophia's soft cheek one last time. "I know. But so am I right now." Marcus, Noah, and two other rangers, Tara Chen and Mike Dawson, set off into the forest, following the blood trail Sierra had left behind. The tracking would be difficult in the darkness, but they had powerful lights, and Mike had brought along his German Shepherd tracking dog, Ranger, who picked up the bear's scent immediately. "She's heading north," Mike observed as Ranger strained at his leash. "Toward the higher elevations." Marcus nodded. "That makes sense. Her den is up near Widow's Peak, but she's moving slow from the looks of the trail. Normally, she wouldn't leave such obvious signs." Noah followed closely behind the rangers, trying to match their silent, efficient movements through the forest. Despite their cautious pace, he found himself struggling to keep up, his city dwellers' fitness no match for these professionals who hiked these mountains daily. "Wait," Tara whispered suddenly, holding up her hand. The group froze in place, listening intently. In the distance, a wolf howled, a long, eerie sound that sent shivers down Noah's spine. Another wolf answered from a different direction, then another. "The pack's on the move," Marcus murmured. "And they've got something cornered." Mike knelt beside Ranger, who was growing increasingly agitated. "Could be Sierra," he said grimly. "The blood trail would attract them." "How far?" Noah asked, dread building in his chest. "Less than a mile ahead," Marcus answered, checking his rifle to ensure it was ready. "But we need to move carefully. A wolf pack in hunting mode is dangerous. And if they're after Sierra, she'll be in an aggressive state, too. They continued forward with increased caution, the sounds of wolf calls growing closer. Noah's heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline sharpening his senses. Every shadow seemed to move. Every breaking twig sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence. After 20 minutes of careful navigation through increasingly rocky terrain, Marcus signaled for them to stop again. Just ahead, the forest opened into a small clearing dominated by a rocky overhang, and beneath that overhang, trapped with her back to the stone, was Sierra. The massive bear was a fearsome sight even in her wounded state. She stood on her hind legs, her fur bristling, roaring defiance at the wolf pack that circled just beyond her reach. 5 wolves now, their lean bodies moving with predatory grace as they sought an opening in the bear's defenses. "She's pinned down," Tara whispered. "Can't retreat further because of the rocks, can't charge without exposing herself to attacks from behind." Marcus raised his rifle, loaded with a tranquilizer dart. "I need a clear shot. If we can dart her, the wolves will retreat once we make our presence known." But before he could aim properly, one of the wolves, a younger, more impetuous male, darted forward, snapping at Sierra's injured flank. The bear swung a massive paw, connecting with the wolf and sending it flying with a yelp of pain. The momentary distraction was enough for 2 other wolves to rush in from different angles, teeth flashing in the moonlight. Sierra roared in pain and fury as one wolf's teeth found purchase in her hind leg. She twisted with surprising agility for her size, clamping her jaws around the attacker and flinging it aside, but the effort cost her. She dropped back to all fours, clearly exhausted, blood now flowing from multiple wounds. "She can't keep this up," Mike said urgently. "The wolves will wear her down." Noah watched in horror as the magnificent creature who had saved his daughter fought for her own life. Without thinking, he grabbed a heavy branch from the forest floor and stepped forward. "Noah, stop!" Marcus hissed, but it was too late. Noah strode into the clearing, waving the branch and shouting at the top of his lungs, "Hey, get away from her!" The wolves froze, startled by the sudden human intrusion. Sierra, too, seemed shocked by Noah's appearance, her fierce eyes finding his in the darkness. For one breathless moment, Noah thought his impulsive action might have worked. Then the wolf leader snarled, turning his attention to this new threat. Noah suddenly realized how foolish his impulsive action had been as the predator began stalking toward him, teeth bared. A shot rang out, then another. Marcus and the other rangers had emerged from cover, firing warning shots into the air. The wolves hesitated, caught between their wounded prey and these new dangerous intruders. After a tense standoff, the pack leader decided the odds had shifted too far against them. With a final defiant howl, he retreated into the forest, his pack following quickly behind. Noah stood frozen in place, the branch still clutched in his hands, as Sierra watched him from beneath the rocky overhang. There was something in her gaze, recognition, perhaps, or simple animal wariness. For several heartbeats, man and bear regarded each other across the clearing. "Don't move," Marcus whispered, coming up slowly beside Noah. "I'm going to tranquilize her now. She's too injured to treat while conscious." Noah nodded slightly, maintaining eye contact with Sierra. "She knows me," he said softly. "She remembers what happened at the river." The ranger raised his rifle carefully, taking aim at the bear's massive shoulder. But before he could fire, Sierra made a decision of her own. With obvious effort, she turned away from the humans and began limping toward a narrow path that led up the mountainside. "She's retreating," Tara observed with surprise. "That's unusual behavior for a cornered bear." Marcus lowered his rifle slightly. She's heading toward her den. It's not far from here, maybe half a mile up that ridge. She might have cubs there." "But you said she was important for breeding," Noah said. "Doesn't that mean she has cubs now?" The ranger shook his head. "Not currently, as far as we know. She lost her last litter to a male grizzly about 2 years ago. One cub was confirmed killed, the other disappeared. She hasn't been seen with cubs since." Noah watched as Sierra's massive form disappeared slowly into the darkness. Then why did she save Sophia? Why risk her life for a human baby? Marcus had no answer, but his weathered face showed a newfound respect for both Noah and the retreating bear. "Let's follow her," he decided. "At a distance. If she makes it to her den, we'll leave her be. If she collapses before then, we'll intervene." The small group began their careful pursuit, staying far enough behind to avoid stressing the injured bear further. Noah's mind was racing with the implications of Sierra's behavior. A wild predator choosing to save a human child, then seemingly recognizing the child's father later. It defied everything he had been taught about wild animals. The trail grew steeper, winding through massive boulders and stunted pine trees that clung tenaciously to the mountainside. Sierra's progress was painfully slow, and several times she stopped to rest, her massive sides heaving with exertion. Each time, Noah feared she would collapse, but each time the determined animal pushed herself back to her feet and continued. "She's incredibly strong," Tara remarked with admiration. "Most bears would have succumbed to those injuries by now." Finally, Sierra disappeared into what appeared to be a small crevice in the mountainside. Marcus signaled for them to approach cautiously. When they reached the spot, they found the entrance to a cave partially hidden by fallen rocks and overgrown vegetation. "This is her den," the ranger confirmed. "She's made it home." Noah stared at the dark opening, feeling a complex mixture of relief and something like kinship with the unseen bear. "Will she survive her wounds?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Bears are remarkably resilient. Now that she's safe from predators, she has a good chance. We'll set up a remote camera to monitor the entrance, make sure she's coming out for food and water. Beyond that, we'll leave her to heal on her own." As the rangers prepared the camera equipment, Noah stood gazing at the den entrance, lost in thought. The events of this night had fundamentally changed his understanding of the natural world and his place in it. He had always viewed wild animals as operating solely on instinct, eating, fighting, surviving, without the higher emotions attributed to humans. But Sierra had demonstrated something that looked remarkably like compassion, like recognition, like connection. "Why did she do it?" he asked quietly, more to himself than to the rangers. "Why save Sophia?" Mike, who had been securing Ranger after the tracking was complete, overheard the question. "You know, there's an old story among the indigenous people of this region. They believed bears were actually people who had chosen to wear animal skins. In their legends, bears could choose to help humans if they saw them as worthy." Tara rolled her eyes. Or maybe she just mistook the baby's cries for those of a bear cub. Animal behavior isn't always mystical, you know. "Either way," Marcus interjected, finishing with the camera setup, "whatever her reasons, your daughter is alive because of her. That's the reality, regardless of why it happened." Noah nodded, taking one last look at the den. "Thank you," he whispered toward the dark entrance. Whether Sierra could hear or understand was irrelevant. The gratitude he felt was overwhelming, a debt he could never repay. As the group prepared to depart, a soft sound emerged from the cave. Not the growl of a predator, but something gentler, almost like a rumbling purr. It was the same sound Sierra had made when she stood guard over Sophia's basket. Noah smiled interpreting it as acknowledgement. Then, with a final nod of respect toward the hidden bear, he turned and followed the rangers down the mountain toward home, toward his waiting family, and toward a world that suddenly seemed both wilder and more wonderful than he had ever imagined. Dawn was breaking over the mountains as Noah finally reunited with Olivia and Sophia at the Pinecrest Ranger Station. The search party had brought them there hours earlier, where medical staff had checked Sophia thoroughly and pronounced her remarkably unharmed from her ordeal. Olivia had refused to sleep, waiting anxiously by the window for any sign of Noah's return. When she spotted him walking up the path with the rangers, exhaustion etched into every line of his face but otherwise unharmed, she rushed outside with Sophia in her arms. Their embrace was wordless, a moment of pure relief and connection as the family reunited under the pink-gold light of the new day. "Sierra?" Olivia asked simply, when they finally pulled apart. "She made it to her den," Noah replied, gently stroking Sophia's cheek. The baby was awake, her eyes bright and curious as she reached for her father's face. "She's hurt, but the rangers think she'll recover." Inside the station, over steaming cups of coffee, Noah recounted the night's events, the wolf attack, Sierra's desperate struggle, and his impulsive intervention. Ranger Marcus had added his own observations, his initial skepticism now replaced with genuine wonder at the unusual bear behavior. "In 30 years in these mountains, I've never seen anything like it," the veteran ranger admitted. "Bears don't typically risk themselves for humans, quite the opposite. And they certainly don't show the kind of recognition Sierra seemed to display when she saw Noah again." Dr. Eleanor Reed, a wildlife biologist who had been called in once news of the unusual bear behavior spread, listened with intense fascination. "There have been rare documented cases of interspecies altruism," she noted, "but usually between animals that regularly interact or have some evolutionary relationship. A wild bear rescuing a human infant is extraordinary." "We know what we saw," Olivia said firmly, cradling Sophia protectively. "That bear saved our daughter. She knew exactly what she was doing." Dr. Reed nodded thoughtfully. "I believe you, and I'd like to study this further if you're willing to share your full account. This could be important for our understanding of bear cognition and behavior." The Winters family spent the next 2 days in Pinecrest, recovering from their ordeal and providing detailed statements about their encounter with Sierra. Their story spread quickly, first among the local rangers and eventually reaching regional news outlets. Some received it with skepticism, others with wonder, but the consistent details provided independently by both Noah and Olivia lent credibility to their extraordinary tale. Before leaving for home, Noah made one request of Ranger Marcus, to visit Sierra's den one more time, to check on her progress. The ranger agreed, though he insisted they maintain a safe distance and use binoculars to observe without disturbing the recovering bear. To their relief, the remote cameras had captured Sierra emerging briefly from her den the previous evening, moving slowly but deliberately as she drank from a nearby spring, before returning to the safety of her cave. Her wounds were visible but no longer bleeding freely. The great bear was healing. "Bears are survivors," Marcus assured Noah as they hiked back down. "She'll carry those scars, but she'll live to fish another salmon run." On their final morning in Pinecrest, as they prepared to return to their city life, Noah and Olivia stood on the porch of their cabin, looking up at the distant mountains where Sierra's den lay hidden among the rocks and trees. "I've been thinking," Olivia said softly, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her arms, "about what happened, about Sierra." Noah waited, knowing there was more. "We've been talking about moving somewhere less urban, somewhere with more nature for Sophia to grow up in," she continued. What if this is a sign? What if we were meant to be closer to this place? Noah looked at his wife in surprise. Olivia had always been the more city-oriented of the two of them, preferring the conveniences and opportunities of urban life. Are you serious? You'd consider moving here to Pinecrest? She nodded, her expression resolute. Ranger Marcus mentioned they need people with your engineering background for the new conservation center they're building, and the elementary school is looking for teachers. She glanced down at Sophia. Our daughter was saved by the wilderness, Noah. Maybe we're supposed to give something back. 3 months later, the Winters family moved into a small cabin on the outskirts of Pinecrest. Noah had accepted a position helping design and implement a new wildlife monitoring system for Blackwood Forest National Park, while Olivia prepared to start teaching at the local school when the fall term began. Their little cabin, surrounded by pine trees and visited by deer at dawn and dusk, was a far cry from their city apartment, but it already felt more like home than anywhere they had lived before. Sierra became something of a local legend, her story spreading throughout the region and beyond. Dr. Reed's research paper on the incident, titled Interspecies Altruism, a Case Study of Ursine Intervention, had sparked debate in wildlife behavior circles and drawn attention to the complex emotional lives of large predators. The bear herself remained elusive, rarely seen by humans, which the rangers considered a positive sign of her recovery and return to normal wild behavior. As summer turned to fall, Noah established a routine of hiking up to a safe observation point near Sierra's territory once a week. He never approached too closely or attempted to interact with the bear, respecting her wild nature and the rangers' strict protocols. But occasionally, from a distance, he would spot her massive form moving through a meadow or fishing at the river's edge. He would watch for a few minutes, then turn away, carrying the image of her strength and resilience back to share with his family. One crisp October morning, 6 months after the river incident, Noah hiked up to his usual observation point with Olivia and Sophia. Their daughter, now 16 months old, was bundled warmly against the autumn chill, babbling happily from her carrier on Olivia's back. They had decided it was time for Sophia to see, even from a distance, the magnificent creature who had saved her life. "We probably won't spot her," Noah cautioned as they reached the overlook point, a rocky outcrop with the views of the meadow where Sierra sometimes foraged for berries. "She's been seen less frequently since the weather turned colder. She might be preparing for hibernation." Olivia nodded, setting up their small picnic while Noah scanned the meadow with his binoculars. Sophia played contentedly with pine cones and colorful fallen leaves nearby, her chubby hands exploring these natural treasures with delighted curiosity. "Wait," Noah said suddenly, adjusting the focus on his binoculars. "There she is, at the edge of the meadow." Olivia quickly moved to his side, following his gaze to where the massive grizzly had emerged from the tree line. Sierra looked healthy, her wounds healed and her coat thick and glossy in preparation for winter. But something else caught Noah's attention, causing his breath to catch in his throat. "Olivia," he whispered, passing her the binoculars. "Look who's with her." Trailing behind Sierra was a small brown form, a bear cub, perhaps 6 months old, tumbling awkwardly through the tall grass as it followed its mother. The cub was adolescent, likely born during the spring, with a distinctive white patch on its chest. "A cub," Olivia breathed, her voice filled with wonder. "She has a cub." Ranger Marcus had told them that Sierra had lost her previous litters, that no cubs had been spotted with her for years. Yet here was evidence not just of Sierra's survival, but of her thriving, passing her remarkable genes to a new generation. "Life finds a way," Noah murmured, wrapping an arm around his wife's shoulders as they watched the bear and her cub forage peacefully in the distance. A sudden, happy shriek from Sophia drew their attention. Their daughter had pulled herself to standing using a nearby rock and was pointing excitedly toward the meadow, though she was too young to possibly see the distant bears without binoculars. "Bear!" she exclaimed clearly, her first recognizable word beyond Mama and Dada. Noah and Olivia exchanged startled glances, then broke into laughter that echoed across the mountainside. Sophia joined in, clapping her hands with delight at her parents' reaction, unaware of the significance of her first chosen word. As they gathered their daughter into their embrace, Noah looked once more toward the meadow where Sierra and her cub had paused, as if listening to the sound of human laughter carrying on the breeze. For a moment, the great bear seemed to look directly toward them, her powerful head raised, nose testing the air. Did she smell them? Did she remember? It was impossible to know what thoughts moved behind those intelligent eyes. But as Sierra guided her cub back toward the shelter of the forest, Noah liked to think there was recognition there. A shared bond formed in a moment of crisis, when the boundaries between wild and human had briefly dissolved in an act of compassion that defied explanation. The Winters family remained at the overlook until Sierra and her cub disappeared into the forest. Then they packed up their picnic and began the journey back to their cabin, their hearts full with the preciousness of their own small family and the unexpected gift they had received. Not just Sophia's life, saved from the rushing river, but a new understanding of their place in the natural world. That night, as Noah tucked Sophia into bed, he told her the story of the brave mother bear who had rescued her from the river. It was a tale he would repeat many times over the years, a foundation story for their family, a reminder of the mysterious connections that existed between all living things. "The bear saved you," he whispered to his sleepy daughter, "and in saving you, she changed all of us." Outside their cabin window, the first snow of the season began to fall, blanketing the forest in pristine white. High on the mountainside, Sierra and her cub would be settling into their den for the long winter ahead. Two mothers, two children, two families, separated by species and yet connected by an extraordinary moment of courage and compassion in the wild heart of Blackwood Forest. And somewhere in the space between human understanding and wild instinct, in that mysterious realm where all living things share the fundamental drives of survival and protection, a bond remained, unspoken, unexplained, but as real as the river that had nearly claimed a life and the brave act that had saved it.